crime, murder, disappearances, conspiracies. The kind of words that make most people turn away, but not us. We don't run from the dark, we study it. We pick it apart until the truth bleeds through, so if you're here, it's not by an accident. You're curious, maybe a little twisted, and I respect you for that. Because tonight, we're not just talking about evil, we're staring it straight in the eye. This is the story of Dean Corll, the Candyman, and trust me, this one isn't sweet. Between 1970 and 1973, this waste of oxygen terrorized Houston, Texas. He's believed to have murdered at least 29 boys, possibly more. And just when you think it can't get any worse, he didn't work alone. He had help. 2 teenage accomplices, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because Henley was the one who finally ended the madness by putting a bullet in Corll himself. But before we get there, let's rewind this nightmare back to the beginning, to figure out how a baby born on Christmas Eve turned into one of Texas's darkest legends. December 24th, 1939, Christmas Eve, while the world was wrapping gifts and singing carols, something else was being unwrapped in Fort Wayne, Indiana, a brand new serial killer. Dean Corll entered the world courtesy of his mother, Mary, and his father, Arnold. From everything we know, Dad was an aggressive, verbally abusive piece of work, and Mom, the overbearing, my boy can't do no wrong, type A perfect storm, really. Most of what we know about his childhood comes from Mary herself, and since she went to her grave swearing her son was innocent, let's just say her version of events might be missing a few details. Even through her rose-colored glasses, though Dean's childhood was, well, it was weird. He was antisocial, didn't like other kids, and preferred to keep to himself. Mary claims it was because one time he went to a birthday party and he didn't get a prize. That's it. That was the trauma. Other kids got yo-yos, Dean got lifelong emotional damage. But hey, instead of learning to cope, he decided to spend his life making sure other kids never got a prize again either. Now here's where things get a little disturbing, and not in the usual way. After his parents' second divorce, because once just wasn't enough, Dean went to live with his grandmother on her farm in Indiana for the summer. He was about 10 years old, and according to dear old Mom, that's where he got all the sexual education a boy could ever need. Yep, you heard that right. The kid's only understanding of intimacy came from watching farm animals bump uglies in the fields. No human connection, just pigs and donkeys doing their thing while Dean's brain took notes. By the time he came back home, whatever empathy he had left, if he ever had any at all, was probably buried somewhere in that barn. Fast forward a few years, Dean, his mom, and his younger brother moved to Vidor, Texas. And if you've never heard of Vidor, congratulations, you're not really missing much. This was what's called a sundown town, which means if you weren't white, you weren't welcome after dark. The place was crawling with racist, degenerates, and overall human garbage. Basically, the perfect breeding ground for a future serial killer. A reporter back then described the town as the kind of place where kids poured kerosene on cats and lit them on fire for fun. Yeah, that's not hyperbole. That actually happened. So you can imagine, little Dean, already a loner with zero empathy, growing up surrounded by that level of cruelty, and instead of being horrified, he joined in. Dean's hobbies included trapping, torturing, and killing small animals, mostly squirrels, and either wearing them around his neck or stuffing them into his boots like some sick fashion statement. He was that kid, the one you'd cross in the street to avoid. Oh, and when he wasn't doing that, he was playing trombone in the school band because apparently serial killers need after-school activities too. But here's where it gets ironic. His family also started the Corll Candy Company. So yeah, the Candyman nickname wasn't just catchy, it was literal. Dean was the creep handing out sweets to local kids, which, knowing what we know now, makes your skin crawl just thinking about it. So remember that whole farm boy turned squirrel slayer thing? Yeah, well apparently Dean decided to trade the smell of dead rodents for something sweeter. One day, Dean's mom meets this traveling peanut salesman. The guy's like, "Hey, you want to make your own candy? You'd make a killing." Which, looking back, is probably the worst phrasing possible. But Mary thought it was a brilliant idea, so she packed up the kids, moved to Houston, and dropped a whopping $50 on a praline recipe, and just like that, the Corll Candy Company was born. Now Dean, ever the golden boy, desperate to please Mommy Dearest, took over running the place. He ran the machines, boxed the candy, delivered the goods. His life at this point was basically dead squirrels, trombone solos, and toffee. If that's not the perfect recipe for a future serial killer, then I don't know what is. And hey, if you play trombone, you're fine, but if you're stuffing squirrels in your boots, maybe call somebody. After high school, Dean takes another trip down memory lane, back to Grandma's farm in Indiana. You know, the same place he got his farmyard education. He lands a job at a coil factory, and here's where things start to really rot. Dean starts hanging out exclusively with kids, not like cousins or family friends, just random kids. His main pals were two little girls from down the road, and he'd make these weird 8-minute movies with them, pretend operations using chicken guts as fake organs. Yeah, that's not creative. That's an early sign your neighbor's gonna end up on a Netflix documentary, in my opinion. But the adults around him, totally fine with it. "Oh, he's such a polite young man," they said. Right, polite, quiet, and casually elbow deep in poultry intestines. Now, Dean didn't have a criminal record. He wasn't setting fires or breaking into houses. Everyone thought he was, quote, vanilla. Yeah, if vanilla came from the freezer in hell. At 24, Dean gets drafted into the Army, ends up stationed at Fort Hood as a radio repairman, and this is where the vanilla flavor got complicated. A fellow soldier later said that this is when Dean had his first sexual relationship with another man. Nothing wrong with that part, but this was the start of Dean realizing how easily he could hide secrets behind a polite smile. He didn't stay long though, less than a year, because Mommy called the Army and said, "Dean needs to come home and help with the candy." And the US government said, "Yeah, sure, seems legit." So Dean, now technically a veteran, comes home to Houston. And here's where things get real creepy. Mary had moved the candy factory right across the street from an elementary school. Because why not, right? Prime business location. Except Dean wasn't just handing out sweets, he was grooming his clientele. He'd call kids over, hand them spoiled candy, joke with them, let them hang around. To the adults, he looked like a harmless Candyman, but behind that smile, Dean was already plotting his next move. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was patient, calculated. He wasn't killing yet, but he was building trust, a reputation, and a disguise. Dean even added a pool table to the back of the factory, to make it kid-friendly. So now he's got a little clubhouse full of kids coming and going, and everyone just shrugged like it was normal. The adults at the factory even said, "Dean's not really into women, but he is a nice guy, works hard, yeah." And that's when Houston's Candyman stopped being the local oddball and started turning into something much, much worse. It's wild to think about, but all the adults who worked at the Corll Candy Company just ignored Dean's weird behavior. Nobody said a word. They just brushed it off, shoved it under the rug, and really pretended not to notice. After a couple of years, the factory had become the hangout spot full of young boys either working there or just loitering around for free sweets. Because, hey, back then, child labor laws were more of a polite suggestion than an actual rule. But what's strange and honestly kind of chilling is that none of these kids ever reported anything odd going on inside the candy factory. Not a thing. Either they were too scared, or Dean had groomed them so thoroughly that they didn't even realize how wrong his behavior actually was. He was the cool guy, right? The one with the candy, the hangout spot, and the smile, and if you snitched, well, you lost your place to belong. In a small, quiet town like Vidor, Texas, where there's literally next to nothing to do, Dean had crafted the perfect trap. Around this time, Dean's mother, Mary, was busy racking up her third and fourth divorces. Yep, you heard that right. And honestly, I'm not sure what's more impressive, her ability to attract chaos or the fact that she still somehow thought she was the victim every single time. It's crazy how a narcissistic, oblivious, money-obsessed woman who neglects her kids somehow can't keep a husband. I mean, shocking, right? But the stress from the divorces tanked the Corll Candy Company, forcing Dean to find a new job at the Houston Lighting Company. Mary, on the other hand, packed up and moved to Colorado because a psychic told her to. Yeah, you heard that right. A psychic. And honestly, that move might have been one of the biggest catalysts for Dean's descent into full-blown madness. Because that's when Dean moved into a small shed right across the street from the same elementary school where the candy factory once stood. Convenient, right? He decked that place out. We're talking blacklight, stereo, a TV, and even a small makeshift alarm system that flashed a red light in his bedroom anytime someone came near the shed unannounced. It was basically every 1970s teenage boy dream's hangout spot. Part game room, part mystery dungeon. And look, as messed up as it sounds, if I was a kid back then, I probably would have checked it out too. Just saying. But Dean wasn't building a hangout, he was building bait, a lure, and he knew exactly what he was doing. Soon enough, teenage boys were constantly visiting the shed. Some worked for him, others just came to hang out. Most said it was fun, cool place, but a few remembered something else. They'd talk about how Dean would get a little too excited when certain boys came around. But since he was nice, nobody thought too much of it. And that right there, that's the pattern. He'd cross lines but smile while doing it, so nobody said a word. Now, as far as we know, during those early years living alone, Dean didn't murder anyone. At least not that we can prove. But that would soon change when he met his first accomplice, David Brooks. David came from a broken home and had known Dean since he was 10. Back then, Dean was handing out candy to the neighborhood kids. So for years, Dean had been grooming this boy, chipping away at boundaries. By 14, David was being exploited, manipulated with cash, kindness, and control. When David was later arrested in 1973, he told police that Dean was the first man to ever accept him for who he was. His father hated him, abused him, so Dean slid right into that empty space, playing the role of father, friend, and abuser all at once. By the time David was 16, he'd move in with Dean and fully fallen under his control. And then things took a horrifying turn. In December 1970, David walked in on Dean torturing two young boys, tied to what would later be known as the torture board. It was a 7-foot-long slab of wood with holes drilled into each corner, handcuffs at the top for wrists, ropes at the bottom for ankles. Dean used it to restrain his victims before killing them, usually by strangulation or a single gunshot to the head. When David saw this, he panicked and ran. But a few days later, he came back. He had nowhere else to go. Dean explained it away, told them the boys were part of some child ring and they'd been sent out of state. David, brainwashed and desperate, believed him, or maybe he just wanted to. Not long after, Dean admitted the truth. He was killing boys, and he offered David $200 for every one he brought to him. David was broke, alone, and now financially tied to a murderer. Dean even bought him a green '68 Corvette for his 16th birthday, a sick way to buy loyalty and silence. The first murderers David helped with were those of James Glass and Danny Yates, two local boys he already knew. They trusted him, they trusted Dean, and from there, it only got worse. Dean rented a small storage unit nearby. With a dirt floor, it became one of the main dump sites. 6 weeks later, David and Dean lured two more brothers, Donald and Jerry Waldrop, to Dean's place. Both boys were murdered. A few months after that, they picked up another friend of David's, 15-year-old Randall Harvey. They offered him a ride to work in Dean's white, windowless van. And if that doesn't set off a million red flags now, it sure should have. That van, that was Dean's mobile torture chamber. When police finally searched it in 1973, they found binoculars, nylon rope, and a two-way radio. Randall never made it to work, and he was taken back to Dean's house, tortured, and eventually shot in the head. His body was buried in the same dirt-floored storage unit. And the wild thing, nobody questioned it. Nobody at the facility thought twice about two men constantly showing up with heavy, foul-smelling bags and leaving empty-handed. David would later claim he never physically took part in any of the murders, and he only helped find and dispose of the victims, which doesn't make it any better. Dean, of course, had already started killing before David ever came along. His first confirmed victim was Jeffrey Conan, a 19-year-old university student last seen hitchhiking in 1970. When his body was found, it was wrapped in plastic, covered in lime, gagged, bound, and buried, suggesting a level of control and precision that only comes from experience. This wasn't a first kill, it was the work of someone seasoned, someone who'd been doing this for a while. But Dean wasn't done. His sick little world was just about to get even darker, because soon another boy would join him, and this one, he wasn't just another victim, he'd become the reason it all came crashing down. And even now, there's speculation that Dean had other assistants before David and Henley, ones who didn't last long enough to tell their story. By the time Randall Harvey's body hit the dirt, Dean Corll and David Brooks had hit their stride. The pair moved with precision now, like a routine. One lore, one setup, one burial at a time. And get this, every single one of their victims so far lived within the same 2.5 square mile radius. Same neighborhood, same schools, same streets. You could probably walk past half their victims in a single afternoon and never even know it. Back then, kids ran away a lot. It wasn't unusual. Some parents didn't care. Others couldn't afford to care. The rest just kind of hoped their kids would wander back eventually. So when boys started disappearing, most folks just shrugged it off. That didn't mean that every parent was blind. Some knew something was wrong. The sad truth is, the system back then didn't give a damn. The Houston Missing Persons Department was basically just a notification service. If your kid turned up dead, then they'd let you know. Otherwise, it was a "sorry ma'am, hope he shows up." Real heroes they were. This lazy, not my problem attitude gave Dean all the freedom in the world. But victims 9 and 10, they wouldn't go quietly. On May 29, 1971, David Hillingston and his neighbor Gregory Winkle vanished. Their families were poor but determined. They did everything they could to find these boys. Printed flyers, knocked on doors, begged for police's help, but nothing. Eventually, they hired a private investigator, and that's when things got insulting. The police found out about the PI, and instead of helping, they took the guy to court to question his credentials. So, they spent weeks and taxpayer money going after the only person actually trying to find the kids. Meanwhile, Dean was out there, smiling, blending in, and burying more victims. The Hillingston family refused to give up. They plastered the city with missing posters, knocking on every door that would open, and one person who helped them the most was Elmer Wayne Henley, one of David's best friends. At the time, nobody knew it, but within 6 months of that search, Wayne would become Dean's next accomplice. Now, Henley's story, it's kind of tragic, but also infuriating. Born in 1956, Wayne grew up rough. His mom was strict, and his dad was an abusive drunk who walked out when Wayne was just in junior high. By then, Wayne was already drinking, breaking into houses, and getting arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. But despite the chaos, people liked him. Wayne was confident, funny, and the kind of guy everyone wanted to be around. That charm would later make him Dean's perfect recruiter. Until Brooks, who was quiet and awkward, Wayne would walk into a room and walk out with a new friend. And that, to Dean, was gold. Dean met Wayne not long after David went missing. He told Wayne about his business, offering him money to lure boys for so-called parties. Dean claimed he just needed models for photos or friends for hangouts. It was all lies, of course. Wayne fit Dean's type perfectly. Young, good-looking, local, he was supposed to be another victim, but Dean saw something else in him. Potential. And within months, Wayne was helping Dean find victims. He'd lure them in with promises of weed, booze, a good time. For some boys, it was candy and soda. For the older teens, it was pills, glue, and paint. Dean knew exactly how to tailor his traps. Wayne, his first recruit, was Willard Branch. 17 years old, he and Dean promised him a fun night. Smoke, drinks, the works. Once inside, Dean convinced him to put on handcuffs. Wayne stepped outside, and Dean did what he always did. Later, Dean told Wayne the same lie he fed Brooks, that the boy had just been sold off in some kind of underground ring. Wayne wanted to believe it. It's easier than admitting you helped deliver someone to die. But soon enough, he learned the truth, and instead of running, he stayed. His next victim was his own friend, Frank. Frank trusted Wayne. He was his buddy, his ride, his safety net, but that trust signed his death warrant. Frank was handcuffed, dragged to Dean's bedroom, and murdered, strangled, and shot just like the others. Years later, even after killing Dean himself, Wayne would tell reporters he still respected that man, said he was smart, well-dressed, quick-witted. That's how deep the control ran. Even after death, Dean still had his claws inside of their minds. By the time Wayne joined in, Dean had hit his 30s and was spiraling. He didn't hang around adults anymore, only teenagers. He was obsessed with staying young, clinging to control. Their parties became a routine. For younger teens, candy and soda. For older ones, booze, pills, weed, and anything that would make them easy to handle. It was a trap, and business was booming. Kids started disappearing faster than ever. Some people noticed, mostly friends of the missing boys, because the police sure didn't. To throw families off, Dean made his victims write letters home before killing them. Letters that said things like, "Hey mom, I got a job working trucks to Washington, be back soon." These notes kept parents quiet for weeks, sometimes months, thinking their boys were alive somewhere. And behind closed doors, these killings got worse. Dean was experimenting, trying new methods, pushing new limits. He moved constantly, 5 to 7 times a year, making it almost impossible for anybody to track him. By the summer of 1973, the trio was falling apart. Brooks got married and moved out. Wayne tried to join the Navy but was rejected for dropping out of high school. And with each of them starting to drift, Dean's paranoia grew. He knew his little empire of fear was crumbling. He just didn't know it would all come crashing down by their hands. By the summer of 1973, Dean Corll's little empire of candy and chaos was starting to crumble. The kids were disappearing, his accomplices were getting sloppy, and even Dean himself was talking about skipping town, heading off to Boulder, Colorado to stay with his mother. The only reason we actually know any of that is because of Betty Hawkins, Dean's so-called girlfriend of 5 years. But girlfriend doesn't really fit here. Betty was more like his cover, his beard. A single mother, pushing 30, no job, and completely wrapped around Dean's finger. They never had a sexual relationship, but she believed everything he ever told her. Even after he was dead, she refused to believe what he'd done, and that's how deep his manipulation ran. Now, around this time, Dean was getting paranoid. He could feel the tension building with his partners in crime, Wayne and David. He knew they were losing control, that maybe they were even planning to turn on him. And he wasn't wrong, as both of them had talked about killing him before, but every time they worked up the nerve, they'd huff paint, pass out, and wake up the next morning like nothing ever happened. But all that changed on the night of August 4th, 1973. Wayne showed up at Dean's place in Pasadena with 2 friends, and his girlfriend Rhonda. They were there to party, drink, and huff paint like usual, but the second Dean saw Rhonda, he flipped. He hated women, couldn't stand them. He started yelling at Wayne, losing it, but after a few minutes, he calmed down, handed out the paint, and let everybody settle in. Wayne woke up first, head foggy but alert, and saw the floor covered in plastic. Saw both his friends were tied up. Rhonda was bound with nylon rope. One of the guys was naked, strapped to Dean's infamous torture board, and Dean was standing there, radio turned up, ready to start. He walked over to Wayne and said, "I'm gonna teach you a lesson, boy." But Wayne wasn't about to die that night. He started talking fast, reminding Dean of all the good times, promising to help him, even saying he'd kill Rhonda to prove his loyalty. Dean actually bought it. He uncuffed Wayne and for some reason stripped completely naked. He pointed at Rhonda and said, "Get to work." That's when Wayne snapped. He grabbed Dean's pistol, pointed it right at him. Dean lunged, charging straight at him, yelling, "Kill me, why don't you? Kill me then!" And Wayne did. 3 shots to the chest, 2 to the back. Dean Corll, the Candyman, dropped dead on the spot. When the cops showed up, Wayne told them everything. He could have claimed self-defense, and honestly, he might have walked, but he didn't. He confessed to everything, to everybody, every detail, dragging David into it too. When police entered Dean's home, they found the usual: the boards, the handcuffs, the wires, the torture tools, and a small wooden box with holes drilled into it. Inside, they found hair and tissue from multiple victims. Dean Corll got a veteran's funeral for his 1 year in the army, but hopefully, wherever he ended up, he's getting the pain he gave out. And the investigation, it was sloppy. Wayne led police to the boat shed, a dirt-floored nightmare where they found 17 bodies. He said there was 19, but they stopped digging because it was too hot. Evidence was tossed, bodies were mixed with mud and lime. Some of the victims had died wrapped in plastic, mouths opened, like they'd suffocated trying to breathe through it. Even worse, they found bags, plastic bags filled with preserved male genitalia. More bodies were later uncovered in High Island, bringing the total to 29 victims. And the sheriff actually stopped the search after that because he didn't want to be remembered as the one in charge of America's largest murder case. Dean Corll held that record until John Wayne Casey showed up with 33 bodies just a few years later. And that is the story of Dean Corll, the Candyman. A man who masked pure evil behind a friendly smile and a pocket full of sweets. Thank you guys for stepping into the shadows and the dark with me on this one. It was a lot of research and a lot of stuff. Definitely hit a few areas of like, what the hell? But It is a real story, and it's a really sad story. My heart goes out to all of the victims and everything they went through. It's pure torture, and I couldn't even imagine. So, if there's anything that you guys are really interested in and you would like me to dive into, please don't hesitate to drop a comment down below, and I will look at them and go over and see what kind of research I can do into the next story. So yeah, until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and stay spooky. See you guys.